As far as tonight's topic, the situation is this. There is a tremendous amount of information that is coming out about things that are not ideal for us, that are not healthy. And sometimes we speak about them, and we do the research, and we find out that these very toxic, bad things. But then you go to live your life, and people around you say, lighten up, don't be so gloomy, it's not that big a deal, it's not going to kill you, it's okay. And the commercials play, and everyone in the mall's doing it, and after a while you start thinking, how big a deal is all this stuff? Do I really need to think or care about any of this? And then you know someone who has a health challenge, and then you read more about all the things that could have contributed to it, and you start feeling like this is a big deal, and then everyone around you says, what's the big deal? It's no big deal. Everyone's been eating this way forever. Everyone's been living this way forever. You make it a big deal. Don't be so intense. Don't be so neurotic, whatever. And then you start thinking, well, maybe I shouldn't make a big deal about this stuff. And then someone you know has a health issue, and then you read more information, and the cycle goes on. So I don't really know what the answer is. I know that in my personal life, I am really, really distrustful of non-natural things. But I am married, and my wife doesn't really want to be that intense about our mattress and our sheets and our pillows and our towels and what paint we use and what carpet and what the couch should be like and the lawn chemicals. So this is an ongoing marital issue that we are dealing with. And I would like to do everything I can to be as conscious as possible, and she wants to do that and also be happy in the moment. And I'm not sure if I'm being too intense or if I'm being rational and practical and protecting us. So I hope that we can get some answers tonight about what it is. So here again, to frame this, in one hand, we understand everyone wants to live their life freely and happily, unencumbered. On the other hand, it's no joke. When someone loses health or any part of health, there's nothing as devastating as losing health. And no one wants to hear after they've lost their health that there was something they could have done. So we'd like everyone to know the facts in advance. If you choose to smoke cigarettes, that's on you, it's fine, but you know the story with it, so at least it's a conscious decision. What we wouldn't want is for one of you to not be aware of what the ramifications are from the products you use and the chemicals in your life. So that is what we are going to try to talk about tonight. Okay. So to open it up, I'd like if each of you would give a short statement. You've all written books and been in this field and had a lot of thought about chemicals, toxins, heavy metals, whatever the words are, and give us kind of your opening statement about how you feel about it, how you feel about it at this point. In other words, tell us your thoughts about this subject, and we'll start from there. If each of you could give us a short opening statement.
I guess I'm the closest, and my first admission is that despite the gray hair, I have not spent hundreds of years studying this topic. Thousands, maybe. So, a second admission is that I have really not spent a lot of time studying pollutants. My interest is in studying the chemistry of water and what we can really understand about water, and some of the things that we've discovered are quite different from what you may read in the textbook. And I guess perhaps my contribution here is that some of the aspects of what we learn could be helpful, useful, and in perhaps cleaning up some of the pollutants, and I can talk about that later. But I guess I must admit that I've been in the same situation as you are, with various family members feeling differently about the subject, and that fuels lots of debates. But I'm certainly on your side. The pollutants are horrific in our environment, and we obviously need to do something serious to ameliorate the situation.
My interest in pollution goes back to starting a master's degree in pollution in London in the 1970s, and that was in response to getting involved with the anti-nuclear campaign. In those days, people were anti-nuclear bomb, but they're okay about peaceful use of the atom. That changed. And during that time, I read The Limits to Growth, and I was struck by that. And Guy the other day mentioned the critical sentence there, that you can't have infinite growth against finite resources. It's just a matter of time. And I was lucky at that time to meet E.F. Schumacher, the author of one of the best books on the environment, Small is Beautiful. The pollutant I chose to study in the master's degree in London was lead. And one of the things which was striking about that was the way that Bryce Smith, an organic chemist at Reading University, was unmercifully attacked by the gasoline industry and the paint industry for what he said about lead. He was making rather innocent comments about you should not use lead in solder for babies' food. But he was attacked. And I was a scientist then. I thought I was a scientist. And I was absolutely shocked at the way they went after this person. Now, it's kind of standard fare to see honest people attacked. And before I go any further, I want to thank Steve for organizing this conference so well and so comprehensively. And for giving us time that we don't normally get. Oh, we've got 3 minutes left. Steve has 3 attributes which I think are common to most of the people I like. And that is, he has an open mind, he has an open heart, and he has integrity. And we must never lose those. And I remember my Latin teacher at grammar school growing up in England. He said, the best definition of an educated person is someone who can entertain his or herself, entertain a friend, and entertain a new idea. And the kicker is in that last one. And what that tells you is that there are very, very bright people at universities who are not educated. And it also tells you there are many citizens out there that haven't got high degrees who are highly educated, which is one of my themes. I think the only hope for the future of this planet and the health of us on this planet is the grassroots. And fortunately, we have internet today, so we can talk to each other. Grassroots activists in different countries can talk to each other, and this saves a lot of time in reinventing the wheel in how we progress. The other thing I've learned, unfortunately, is that too many regulatory agencies are working for the other side. The FDA, the EPA, the CDC, and so on, and that's a shocker to me. I don't think that any civil servant should spin. That's not their job. Their job is to give objective information to the decision maker. Any spinning, let it be the politicians, not the civil servants. So I've had interests in lead, interest in mercury, interest in aluminium. It is aluminium, by the way.
Not aluminum.
You're not aluminum. Alcoa made a spelling mistake in the early 1900s, and rather than waste 20,000 pieces of paper, that spelling mistake has now infiltrated the whole of the American empire. I'm also interested, thanks to my wife, in 1996 with fluoride. And there are many things about fluoride that will shock you. Most people don't want to know. And there's a pesticide containing fluoride which is particularly pernicious, and that's sulfuryl fluoride, which is a fumigant on food. And because of my involvement with incineration, I'm particularly concerned about dioxins, endocrine disruptors, and the last horrible aspect of incineration. Thank goodness we don't have too many. Most of them are in Florida. Too many in the United States. We stopped over 300 being built between 85 and 95. They've only built one since 1997 in the United States. But the latest wrinkle on the pollution from incineration is that it produces and releases nanoparticles. Many combustion sources release nanoparticles. The trouble with incineration is that those nanoparticles are the most toxic of all the nanoparticles that we're able to make in diesel trucks and so on. So those are some of my interests in pollutants.
Stephen started out correctly that many of you, even sitting in this room as well as watching us worldwide, easily can throw your hands up and say this is overwhelming, that you just want to live your life. Well, I'm here to say that you cannot live your life. You cannot have freedom. You cannot expect to live to a ripe old age and to be with your loved ones if you don't start to look at the corruption that we call modern society today. We no longer have the privilege to avoid this or not to address it. You would expect, as my colleague just said, that government organizations worldwide that were sworn to protect the good of the citizenship would do it, but they're not only not doing it, but as so well articulated a minute ago, they're part of the problem. They're hiding the problems, they're lying to you, they're deceiving you, and by the way, that's why it has gotten as bad as it is today. Somehow along the way, when I was probably 30 years old, I realized that there were a lot of stones not turned. Even in the natural health field, there is a whole lot of nonsense that goes on in the natural health field. So I started to turn some uncomfortable stones. And even things that you and I would suspect are healthy for us, like supplements, you may read about this in my book, Supplements Exposed, 91% are dangerous, are deadly chemicals, and will hurt you and destroy your health and weaken your immune system. Anna Maria, as Stephen told you, and I wrote a book. Why? Not because we're experts in the garment industry, we're not. But because nobody ever wrote the book and told the public that the clothes you wear are deadly. 2,000, listen closely, the average piece of clothing that you're listening to us now, probably adorning your body with, has been made with 2,000 chemicals. 2,000 chemicals. Dr. Pollack, who I think is the most brilliant man that has ever been in the world of science in the area of water, I'm sure we'll speak later, but when I speak to marine biologists, oceanographic scientists, when I wrote a book called Killer Fish, I was stunned to find out that they told me there's not a drop of drinking water on the planet Earth, be it the North Pole or South Pole, that doesn't have some level of pharmaceutical drugs in it and plastics because of something called rain. And it universally spreads all over the world and gets into our aquifers. And then the intentional chemicals that are literally placed into foods and so-called pesticides and fungicides and herbicides is so bizarre that you and I today take this for granted, and we have to actually spend more money. We have to go and buy ecological, biological, and organic food, spend more money not to be poisoned. And once again, it's an elitist idea. Thank God I have the money and the knowledge to do that. But how about the population that doesn't have that? So once again, bad on them. So this is an overwhelming problem, and any of you listening that are on the fence, get off the fence, because you're not going to take responsibility, changes won't come. And if you're so lethargic and apathetic that you don't care about yourself, think about your children, your grandchildren, and future generations.
You know, you really think that somebody's looking after you and looking after the food and your water and the water you get in your tap. And yes, you are being looked after by a vicious organization. It's called Codex Alimentarius, and they were supposed to set the standard. They started really together with World Health Organization and United Nations and agricultural groups in the early 1960s, and they were setting standards for the whole globe. And they are letting us use in agriculture and in all our foods, they're letting us use some of the worst chemicals known to man. It's in our foods. So, you know, it's very close to our heart because these chemicals causes changes in DNA. And it's not something you can see right away, so it could get into generations. And it could happen maybe years after a child is born, something that the mother got or something that the mother was close to. For example, if a husband is working with DDT and he comes home, he gives that to his wife. And if she's pregnant, she will actually give that to her unborn child. And that child, maybe years later, will have cancer. So, it's very close to us because we deal with children. The families come through our institute and, learn about lifestyle. They learn about how they can cleanse, how they can change their system, and they can rebuild their whole immune system. Because especially a child that's still, growing and changing their central nervous system, and everything is just growing in their body. They are so much more sensitive than the adults are. And, if we want to have a generation that's going to be healthy, and if we want to conquer diseases, obesity, if we want to conquer diabetes, if we want to conquer cancer, we all have to work together, and we have to say no to standard rules that codex have. Because, I'm from Sweden, I'm European, and it is heartbreaking to see how it's stopping especially people that are in this field and working with organic farming. What is organic farming? It's been watered down so much now that really anything can be called organic. So we have a lot to do, and the problem is that Codex is above your country's laws. So they are above what your Senate and Congress. So they're more or less just following what the laws are, what the standard is, and it's horrendous. It is really scary the more you get into it, and I think it was coming above our heads, most of us, and pretty late because it's been years that it's been in working.
So I am a filmmaker, and what I do is take a massive amount of information and distill it into a film that just regular people can understand. I talk to scientists and people who are experts in their field and make that information available to people, because I think it is possible for us to change. I think it's all going to come from grassroots. I agree about that. But it also has to be top down, because we can do all the things we want to do, but if we're not protected by our government from these chemicals and toxins that are in the air and the water and the soil, we're going to get them. One of the reasons I made a film about GMOs was I realized that my philosophy, I was in college in the late 60s and I was kind of a dropout. I figured you could drop out of the sort of toxic dominant culture and create your own separate culture. And that doesn't really work that well. But what I realized with GMOs is they will come and get you. You have an organic farm and someone sets up a chemical farm next to you. Chemical drift can come over, GMO pollen can come over, and basically you've lost what you wanted to create. So that's what I've done. And I'm working on a project now about 24 of the pioneering organic farmers from the United States and Canada who started farming in the 60s and early 70s. And every single one of them was passionate about organic farming and not using chemicals and going back to more traditional methods, but also updating them with current information. Every single one of them was told by the experts at the time, the state universities, the land-grant universities, that they could never grow commercially organically. It would never happen. You couldn't do it, give up, don't even bother. And of course, every single one of them and tens of thousands of other organic farmers said, we can do it, they are doing it, and now they're the fastest growing part of the food industry. So it is possible to change, but I think that we have to gain political power. And I know now that seems like a kind of sort of a hopeless thing because our government is so controlled by corporations, but I think that we have to have such a strong grassroots movement that the people in power have to give way. And I think that that's the way it has to be. Otherwise, they're just going to contaminate us out of existence. So That's what I think. And there are tens of thousands of agricultural chemicals that are used now. Most of them haven't been even tested. They were grandfathered in. So I think that even starting with the food we eat, I actually think, I'll say this here, it's going out to the world, I think that the kind of food that a lot of Americans eat actually makes them stupid. I really do. And I see it, and I just think, they're not feeling well, they're actually, if you eat certain kinds of bad fats, your brain doesn't work. The electrical energy doesn't go from one synapse to the next synapse. You're actually deadening your brain. So I know I'm sort of food obsessed, and I'm an organic fanatic and all that sort of thing, and I'm also, I'm hungry for change, but I also feel that we have to let people know, and we have to let people know when we go in their houses. I mean, some of my friends, you go, really? Really? You have this? You have this in your kitchen? You're using Raid? I mean, think about what you're using here. And it makes, it makes you the dinner guest from hell. It's like, what are you? But I think we can change it, and my work, what I try to do is to fortify people with information and fortify them and hearten them to make the changes that we need to make, because I believe that we can make them. Look how much things have changed in just the past 20 years. Just look at that. Look what's popular. Look what's cool now. It's totally different than what it was 20 or 30 years ago. So I think it's possible, and it's great to be here with like-minded people. Thank you.
And we were so close with Bernie. We were so close, which is an indication, I might add, of how close we're going to possibly be. He's not the only one out there. But in any case, and when you think about what people eat, and you see that picture of Donald Trump sitting there in front of the McDonald's burger on his jet, makes you want to throw up yourself. I'm really not worthy of being up here. I thought I was here just for the humor. And when you look at the top, what I do is I write books about the science behind gardening, because I was curious about organic gardening when someone challenged me, and so I wrote a book that describes the science behind organic gardening so that I could understand why I should be an organic gardener. I needed to learn about the science. The second book I wrote was, about how plants eat, because I was curious about how they eat. There are all these myths. You feed them fertilizer and you do this and that, but what's the science behind it? How do plants take in food? And then this third book I wrote, about a particular kind of fungi, which basically are responsible for life on Earth, and nobody ever heard about them before. And what I do is I just take my average mind and I try to find enough science out there where I can finally recognize the words and then translate them down like you do with your films, so that, I can understand what's going on and then maybe use some of this stuff. And so that's what I do. I'm struck as an average guy about a couple of things. So I walk around Safeway. I live in Anchorage, Alaska. We have Safeway. Safeway has their own organic brand, but they don't sell any organic meat at this Safeway. And so I walk up to the manager and I say, "Excuse me, I just have one simple question. Do you think I only want some of my food to be organic?" He thinks about it, and of course it's a pretty compelling argument. Why are you bragging about organic and not? And so he goes up the line, and now we've got a little bit of organic, and I have to go and buy it all because I think I'm the only one who can afford the meat up there, because you're all buying my books. But in any case, it's sort of that kind of stuff. And then you think about a UN report coming out that says Roundup is possibly carcinogenic. And I'm just an average guy, right? I read that, and it says possibly carcinogenic. First of all, I know it's the United Nations, it's watered down, it's been influenced, it's been beaten up, it's been possibly carcinogenic. Holy crow. That's not what I say. I say, holy shit. And there's a company in this world that sells the stuff, and another company that licenses it. And every spring, there's a Scottish guy that comes on TV and yells at me that I need to buy it. And it's possibly carcinogenic. I know it. Everybody knows it. Come on, everybody knows it. And you can't tell me that the people who make it don't know it. And there it is. But there's Bernie, you know, and we all got behind him in a kind of a way, those people that were concerned about this stuff, because there is a possibility for change, and if we don't have that possibility for change, then we are stuck in 1984. You know, we went by 1984, but we're in 1984 pretty close, so we got to be careful. And then, of course, then I take a look at, you know, things like dandelions. Everybody hates dandelions. I always say if they came in different colors, people would love them. But everybody wants to kill their dandelions, right? And so they spray them. You spray anything outdoors, and someone 50 miles away is impacted by the spray drift, 50 miles away. I live in Alaska, pretty pristine place. I mean, you know, we've got some crazy politicians, yeah. Pretty pristine place. And the Alaska Railroad is the only railroad in the entire state. You take Alaska, it's 1/5 the size of the United States, goes from Seattle down to Miami here. The railroad decides it needs to spray Roundup to kill the weeds. 50 miles up and down the entire railroad system. Whether you like it or not, every salmon stream, anything. Oh, we're not spraying near this. We stop when we get to the streams and go across the bridge, and then we start again. 70 miles with the drift. It's crazy. I'm just an average guy up here. These people are scientists and you know, real communicators who've got United Nations credentials and everything else. I'm just an average guy, and I'm listening to them, and I'm believing them, most of what they say. I don't have to believe everything they say, but I know one thing. We all need to be saying, holy shit, why are we letting them do this to us? You know, and there's many things I could talk about, but we're going worldwide. I don't want my, you know, brothers and whatnot to hear me say some of these things, but there are lots of things we could be talking about where we have been put into the little spot of 1984 slaves, and we better fight it or we're screwed. And we better start screaming holy shit an awful lot and doing something about it and talking to each other about it like we are now. So thank you.
What are the first 5 recommendations you would make for someone that wants to stay healthy and keep their family healthy, and you don't have a lot of time, so you want to be direct and say, so if, you know, if there's a list of 100 things, what's the top 5 that you want to make sure? If you have a 1-minute phone call with your family member and they go, tell me the 5 most important things I can do to avoid chemicals, pesticides, toxins, or any radiation or any kind of exposure that's harmful to me, what are your first 5 suggestions? Assuming there's more, but what would be the first 5 you would make?
Kill yourself. Kill everybody around you. I mean, you can't avoid this stuff. How many people here ate at the restaurant today? I ate there today because I had to. It was raining like crazy. Was it organic? I have no idea, but I bet you it wasn't. Wait a minute. I know it wasn't. Holy shit, of course it wasn't. So what do? You try to eat organic. You try to only breathe fresh air. You wash your hands whenever you possibly can. You be pleasant to everybody around you because mood means things. And from my perspective, you don't do anything harmful to the soil.
Well, that's good. I also say eat organically. Be very careful about the clothes that you wear. They're now more and more organic cotton. It's more expensive, but you know that's something we should try to do. I think it's important to be politically active and make the communities we live in know that we don't want Roundup or these chemicals sprayed on schoolyards or parks or streets where people walk, and just protest and be a huge pain in the ass until they do something about it. I also think one thing that I'm aware of because of my work is there's a thing called biosolids, and it's what is left over after they take the water out of sewage sludge. Because the Clean Water Act was passed and they compromised and they said the water would be really clean and everything would be left in the sludge. Now it's toxic if they put it out, if they put it in a toxic waste dump. I mean, if they tried to get rid of it, it would be called a toxin and they would have to go through all kinds of things in order to get rid of it. But if you put it into a bag of compost, it's no longer waste, so it doesn't have to be labeled toxic waste. So you can actually call it organic. You can call it organic because when the organic standards were passed, it got grandfathered in. So the companies that do this, it's called biosolids. It's very expensive to get rid of that stuff if you're trying to landfill it or whatever. So there are municipalities that sell it, that give it away to compost companies so that they can get rid of it rather than go to the expense of trying to get rid of it some healthier way. So they put it and they actually give it away, and they give it away to school gardens. And so what you need to do if you're buying bags of compost is look, even if it's labeled organic, you need to read through the ingredients, and if it says biosolids, you need to not only get rid of it, but see if there's schools where you're living that are using that because they're being given it by the compost companies. How lovely. So avoid biosolids or organic compost that contain in the ingredients biosolids. And I think supporting local farmers and farmers that grow organically is a good thing, because the more power we have, the more money that is spent in a certain industry, the more heft we'll have when it comes to passing laws that will protect us from these things.
I would say, if it's my family, I would say, if you have kids, I want you to make sure all your household products, all the chemicals and pesticides you have in the house, let's change it to biodegradable products. And there are a lot of companies out there that has great products, so you don't mess up the environment just by doing that. And I learned, I'm brought up outside Stockholm on the peninsula, and we have our own water, we have our own sewer, and one day my mother got chlorine flushers for the toilets. And where the sewer water would come out, it always grew plants and grasses, even through winter and snow. And now with the chlorine flushers, everything died. It just became a filthy mush. And we wondered, what did we do different? And it was these toilet flushers. And when you live in a city, you don't see what you are doing, what change you make when you have chemicals in your household. So, your water is everybody's water, your sewer water is everybody's sewer water. So you don't see the difference. So that was a great lesson for me, that everything you do matters. Everything. And you could be the example to start using better products. So, I would say pack your own lunch. Pack your own lunch so you don't depend on other people. And of course, we're so much into live food and sprouting, so starting with organic seed and then growing your own food as much as you can. I mean, that's amazing to bring to lunch. And go organic and go vegan, I mean, it's not sustainable to eat meat. It's going to be something that we absolutely can't have. And, for your health and for your sanity, like you said, I mean, we're really being dumbified. We're being fed tons of high fructose corn syrup. And do you know now that it doesn't say high fructose corn syrup on the stuff anymore? It will say fructose or fructose syrup. So they know that because of Dr. Seneff at MIT, she really proved for us that it is totally connected with autism. And not only that, diabetes and obesity. So when they do research with rats with high fructose corn syrup, they all become fat. They all go obese. So I would say that, and the clothes that we wear, of course, I've been working on organic cotton bras for 15 years because so many women come with breast cancer to our institute, and I just wanted them to have available something that was absolutely right for them. And talked about Victoria's Secret the other day. It's for men to buy for their wives. It's not the women that really buys them, it's men buys it for their wives to be pretty. It has nothing to do with health, and it's the opposite. It actually can increase the breast cancer risk 6 times with the polyester nylon, the underwear. So if underwire, if that's what you use, you burn that bra, okay? Don't burn, okay, don't burn. cut it, cut it in pieces, let it go into nature. It'll probably take, what do you think, 300 years for it to go down? Well, so we don't want it on our body at all. And what's the other two? Did you guys get 5? So, I think starting with what you have really close to your body, and anything from sports. Sports is amazing to wear organic underwear and organic sports clothes. You feel totally different. And you of course, if you have a newborn, you want to make sure that they don't inhale any of the bad chemicals. We put fire retardants in newborns' pajamas. Yeah, pajamas, and they sleep in that. And guess what? The urine the next day has the fire retardant. So when you buy, you have to go organic. Absolutely. And hopefully you understand about diapers, because kids are going to have diapers the first 2 years of their life, and they're going to inhale all these chemicals that normal diapers have that you buy. And, it just takes you, it just opens your eyes. Like, I can't even just go and buy diapers. I have to look for diapers that either are chlorine-free and chemical-free, or I go back to what my mother did. We had cotton diapers and wool covers. That's what we did. And, it's nothing to it. And because we have washing machines, your mother always told me she had a pot on the stove and it was cooking your diapers. So,
What they fed me, they cooked.
Oh my God. So here you go.
When we think about how to get rid of poisons in our life, I prioritize this in a way, how quickly will we die if we don't address this issue? So we start with oxygen. Every environmental protection agency, I read 17 countries, tell us that inside of a home or an apartment is between 6 and 7 times more polluted than outside, even if you live in Los Angeles or Paris, a highly polluted city. So you must either get an appropriate, proper air filtration system, and most of them on the market, including expensive ones, are a farce. They don't work. You must also open your windows and breathe fresh air 12 months a year, wherever you choose to live, be it hot or be it cold. When you drive your automobile, you should crack your window. Even a Bentley or a Rolls-Royce has fumes that go inside of the carriage. And so number 1 is oxygen, and that's what you do for that. Number 2 is water. This has become an abundantly clear subject to me, since all water, as I mentioned previously, is polluted, and they intentionally put fluoride as well as chlorine, which both kill you, alter the brain, alter the nervous system, and also give you cancer. These are not opinions. These are not holistic facts or New Age rhetoric. This is the most cutting edge and absolutely empirically proven science that we can speak about today. So you must get water to a distilled level, something that's that pure. Rainwater without pollutants in it is like distilled water. And Dr. Pollack will address this even more than I will, I'm sure. Number 3 is food. And if you're not a plant-based eater today, you're part of the problem. What we do know scientifically is where most chemicals, most heavy metals reside is in fat. And so that's animal fat. And we'll start with fish. We'll go to little chickens and turkey. We'll go to pork, which even the Bible wrote about, and that was several, hundreds of years ago, or thousands, a couple of thousand years ago. And we go to the red meat, the notorious one, and many of you listening say, well, I don't eat meat, I eat fish, and I eat pork, and it's all meat. That's meat. Eggs, by the way, are riddled with pollutants. Dairy food is maybe even more riddled with pollutants on an average than all meats. So if you want to be polluted, you want chemicals, continue to eat animal-based foods. The so-called organic meats are a farce, a complete fraud. A book I'm starting in December will expose that, maybe clearer than people have in the past. It is all 100% a fraud. There's no such thing as organic meat. There's no such thing as a moral or merciful way to slaughter an animal and to eat it. There's no way that you can consume meat and not destroy the planet Earth that you're on. So now I've just talked about the plant-based consumption. Now we talk about growing food inside of your own home. We've been teaching that for 60 years successfully. And along the way, thank God, science taught us something we didn't even know. Why, since 1956, thousands and thousands of people like Anna Marie and I have successfully fought the aging process, and thousands more have reversed catastrophic disease, and tens of thousands more have prevented catastrophic disease, is because there's the most important medicine all of biology, all of science has ever discovered in raw plants and in the sprouts more than any raw plant. That, by the way, is an incredibly inexpensive way to get the most protein, the most vitamins, the most minerals, the most essential fat, and you can be sure it's organic because you're growing it in your kitchen window for pennies, So this is not an elitist idea like buying organic food at the Whole Food Market. This is something when I go proudly into ghettos around the world, I can teach. So growing your own food basically is good. Of course, lastly is to purchase organic food. Although it's flawed, at least they're attempting to not put the deadly chemicals on it at that point. And we have lobbyists in Washington and have for 10 years, and fought, and we're successful. They wanted to actually mandate that eventually you would only buy genetically modified seeds. So far, we've been successful in stopping that. I think in New Zealand they haven't, or they're trying to take that over at this point. We were not successful taking the one sentence out we worked for a couple of years on, where organic rules or organic laws will come from prevailing science. Prevailing science is not the legitimate Hippocrates Health Institute or Dr. Pollack at Washington State University, but Monsanto and DuPont, etc. So someday when you're sleeping and nobody's watching, as most people aren't, you're chopping away at your organic potato chips and organic soda, that basically they're going to make the rule go through and say it's perfectly fine to put genetically modified food into organics. Then we get to detoxification. Years ago, one of my close friends and colleagues did some research on hyperthermia, which has been widely used in countries like Germany to reverse viruses, bacteria, and cancers, with empirical data that's proven that it works. You just have to heat the body up a half a degree, it starts to reverse this. So 25 years ago, when he basically came to me in my office and said, we have shown that this works, but by the way, you don't have to go to a medical doctor and take anticonvulsion medicine and get your body heated up 6 degrees, get into an infrared sauna 20 to 30 minutes a day, and if you have cancer, from 30 minutes to an hour a day, 7 days a week, and it's more effective than anything else. And by the way, it takes 87, write this down in your head, 87% more heavy metals, chemicals, and toxins out of your body than does a normal sauna or a normal steam bath. So that's number 4 on the list. And number 5 is to reiterate what several people have said, in your house, your carpeting most likely is made of formaldehyde. Your paint, if you have an old house, is most likely lead. If not, you're lucky. But all the new paints, even at the large commercial shops today, globally, you can buy low toxic. There's no such thing as no toxic, unless you buy little pints from Germany. You know, like Liv, they make non-toxic. You could almost eat the stuff. Not that you would like to, unless you want to turn color. But bottom line is, you can do that, and from this point on, make those decisions. If you choose to continue to cook food, get to the Italians. They make 100% stone cookware. Stone, because even stainless steel has nickel in it, that, by the way, destroy the eyes and the body and the neurological system. So find out these things. Don't let yourself say, well, let's go listen to the expert. Become the expert. You think I was an expert? When I was young, I was the poster child for what not to do. And so I had to become the expert by learning, just like you. You're not a scientist, but by the way, you probably are articulating and writing more than most scientists know who are in denial.
Well, I would start with just encouraging as many people to recognize that we live in two worlds. We have the real world, and we have the world constructed by public relations companies in the service of corporations. Monsanto, GMOs is a classic example. I agree with everybody else. Eat organic or grow your own food. Here, I think a special plea, we need to consider how to get organic food to low-income families. One suggestion is, we know, going to my waste management hat, we know that reuse as opposed to recycling is high value, low volume. Recycling is high volume, low value. Reuse then creates jobs, creates businesses. So we need to more and more reuse and repair operations, which in turn will make money, and if it's done in low-income areas, that money can be used to subsidize organic food from local farms. First and second thing is, don't drink tap water with fluoride in it. That can be expensive. What my wife and I have done, we live in a fluoridated community, is we found a local spring. We go to that spring and fill up about 20 bottles, liter bottles, with spring water. So one thing you can do is to go on the internet. There are sites which tell you where the nearest spring is to your house, and that's a good investment. I mean, we went there on Sunday, and we got 24-liter bottles. That saved us $24 going to the supermarket. Next thing is, if you don't have so-called silver fillings. Silver fillings are mercury. They're 50% mercury. So make sure that your kids don't get mercury fillings. Unfortunately, low-income families are forced to have mercury fillings. And avoid the propaganda which says they're safe and effective, etc. Another thing to do with water, simple precaution. Run the water for at least a minute in the morning. Don't drink water that stood in the pipes. You may or may not know whether they're lead pipes somewhere. You may not know whether the joints contained lead soda or the brass fittings and so on. So run the water, count to 100, especially for young children. Young children, make sure they learn that. Might be a good idea. Okay, next. For over 20 years now, I've avoided aluminium wherever I possibly can. I don't ever buy a deodorant, underarm deodorant, with aluminium in it. I don't have antacids with aluminium in it. My wife and I have avoided aluminium cookware. One thing in particular, avoid those Italian coffee pot things, which are, some of them are made of aluminium. Make sure if you use that technique that you use stainless steel for that. Lastly, I would recommend, and it's not that expensive, to get a hair analysis for your children. Have their hair analyzed to see what their burden of toxic metals is right now. We had a friend who did this. He was living near an incinerator in Springfield, Massachusetts. And one of the things which shocked him and us was the highest metal in that hair analysis for many children was aluminium. Now, it's a possibility with the advent of the incinerator. This is the first time that the ordinary person was exposed to airborne aluminium. You know, those aluminium cans going into the furnace, it was vaporized. Hitherto, most of the people that were exposed to airborne aluminium were working in aluminium smelters. Now we're all exposed to that, and the problem with aluminium, of course, it's implicated in Alzheimer's disease. And it's interesting, if you look at the history of incineration, it might be interesting to see how they relate, the increase in Alzheimer's disease.
So many words of wisdom have come forth, and I would like to say a few things that relate primarily to water among the comments that have been put forth. And it's mainly because we've been studying water for some years, and we discovered a phase of water. I don't know how many of you have heard my talk. It's a phase of water that is a crystalline like phase. And although it was predicted more than 100 years ago, it's only now that we're beginning to realize that this is something real. And not only that it's real, but it's something that fills your body. It's the kind of water that fills your cells. And so the very existence of this phase of water brings to mind new, fresh ideas in terms of what's healthful, what's good for your body, and what to avoid. And so I have a few things on that. And the first is to say, and these stem from some of the comments that we've heard. The first is there are various waters that should be polluted, heavily polluted, really ugly waters that actually turn out to be clean. The first one I heard of is in Russia, in an area called Karelia, which is north of St. Petersburg and near the Finnish border. And there's a lake near there, and the lake is, the trees are cut. There's a sawmill, and you'd expect that the debris from the sawmill would cause a great pollution there, but the lake is absolutely pristine and clean, and the question is, how is this possible? It shouldn't be. And the Russians have found that there's a particular kind of mineral called shungite, which actually grows naturally and lines the water. And this shungite, my colleagues who have studied it, actually creates this kind of fourth phase or easy water that we're talking about. And this seems to have a cleansing effect on the water. And we think we know why, but it's not completely clear. And in a couple of other instances where colleagues of mine in different countries, and one is in New Zealand and one is Malaysia, have actually cleaned up the dirtiest of waters using techniques, technologies. They really don't understand how it happens, but it happens, demonstrably happens. So mostly these are machines that put out certain frequencies electromagnetically. And they're different from one another. The groups don't know one another, but the result seems to be the same, that you in the polluted waters, and they're deadly, I mean, deadly looking and deadly, the machine's put into the water, and over a period of time, like a week or 2 weeks, it cleans. And they really don't understand why it cleans. And it's not completely clear why it cleans, but the point is, the first point is that these are the kinds of technologies that need to be studied, because if they demonstrably clean what is otherwise dirty, then this is something really powerful for humanity. And these are very simple machines. All they do is put out certain frequencies of electromagnetic energy, and voila, it's clean. So this is pretty amazing. I think it has something to do with this phase of water, but it would be more complicated to explain. Another point that comes on my list is, which was brought up before, is planting your own garden. And so one way to do that is to go back to Rudolf Steiner and his method of biodynamic farming. We have a garden. We haven't tried it yet, but I've read and met people who have done it, and the results are astonishing. And so one of the factors involved in so this is gardening without any kind of fertilizer. And I read recently of the results of some Californian grape grower who adopted this method. So zero fertilizer, and the earth is restored by this. And not only is their yield abundant, but also economically, it turns out to be quite feasible to do this. So one of the secrets of biodynamic farming, among other seemingly weird-seeming procedures, is to take a pail and to dump just a tiny bit of compost in it, and then swirl it around for 30 minutes in one direction, and then swirl it around for 30 minutes in the other direction. And nobody would dream of doing anything like this, but it seems to work. And it harks back to the studies of water that were done, the classic studies by Victor Schauberger, who was a naturalist, not a scientist, who studied water and studied rivers and saw how the rivers bent and twisted. And he understood that the water that's gone through this is living water as opposed to water that's just sitting there, which is like this, which is dead water. And the living water is the one that is good for your health. So, and we think that the living water, the one that's gone through vortices, is actually the fourth phase water, which is probably good for your health. It's not, we haven't exhaustively tested it, but your cells are full of this kind of water, and most of us are dehydrated, and if you can replace your missing water with the same kind of water that actually normally fills your cells, then that should be good for you. And Steiner's method maybe does the same thing with this swirling technique, and it creates living water, water full of easy fourth phase water, and the plants love it, and so they flourish, and you have wonderful plants. The next point is in your vegetable garden to, of course, take not only the fruits of the garden, literally, but also the juice. And so there are many juicers, and I know many people are into juicing, and we studied juicing in our laboratory. And so what you do is you take the vegetable or the fruit and you run it through a machine that basically squeezes out the juice. It pulverizes, and you drink the juice. And so many health physicians and health practitioners advocate drinking juice for whatever ails you. And so we wondered whether it makes sense that what you're doing is you're taking the water from inside the plant cells and giving it to your cells, replacing what's missing. And I know from speaking to various of those people who have done that this is extremely effective no matter what. We did experiments to demonstrate that this water contains the plant water contains the fourth phase water that fills your cells as well as the plant cells, and so this really makes sense. The other point that was mentioned was hyperthermia. So hyperthermia is heat, and so why is heat good for you? Well, according to our studies, what builds this kind of water inside your cells most effectively is infrared radiation. Now, you would call this heat, right? And so if you wrap yourself in a jacket of some sort that increases your temperature, basically you're being exposed to infrared energy. You're receiving that infrared energy. This is the very energy that builds the easy or fourth phase water that fills your cells. Water that you need to function properly, because the proteins inside your cells that fold or unfold to do whatever is the work of the cell, they're ordinarily in an environment that contains this water, that contains an abundance of this water. When we're kids, we're born with it. When we get older, we don't have enough of it. When we're sick, we don't have enough of it. So if you expose yourself to infrared energy, or heat, if you will, that's what builds this kind of water. And that's why, at least my own experience, going into a sauna in Finland or a banya in Russia, you come out feeling wonderful. You have muscle aches, the muscle aches are gone. You have a headache, you feel depressed, it's wiped out. And I think we may think of a psychological reason for this, but I think also there's a very simple physical reason for it, and that is this infrared energy that you're exposed to. It builds inside your body what you need to be healthy. And finally, spring water. You can get it near our house, 10 miles away. It's wonderful. It's filled with minerals. So we found that if you have mineralized water, the minerals create EZ, a fourth phase, around each molecule. And so most of the waters that come from down below, mineralized waters, should, at least in theory, and in practice it seems so, be good for your health. That's something that I too would advocate. So those are a few. And the final thing is the aluminum, or what we call aluminum, if you pardon. I wonder about the chemtrails that we see and that are never discussed in the newspapers or in journals. It's maybe not so odd that they're not discussed, but they release particles of metal. I'm not sure if aluminum is one of them, but I think or maybe it's aluminium, or maybe both. I think, and that is definitely a source of worry for all of us.
Okay, great, thank you. So I realize that all of you have a lot of thoughts on a lot of topics, and on each topic you could give long answers. But as a benefit to our audience and the people who are at home, I would like to try something different. And although you could each expound on any answer, I'd like to ask about 50 questions. And to do that, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask a question that I think people really want to know. They're going to just trust you on the science behind it. And if you would answer the question yes or no, just one of you, take 30 seconds to explain it. And I think it would benefit people because there's a lot of things they really just want to know what you think. So refrain from the details of why, just give us the yes or no and a 30-second answer, and I'm going to try to go through 50 to 70 questions that I really think people desperately feel like if you don't answer it, they have no idea how to get this answer. So, give it a shot. Okay.
I'll be last.
All right, so here we go with 1-minute answers, and just one of you answer, whoever feels that, if someone has a strong feeling to second it, that's fine. Okay, so first 1-minute question. Should we be dry cleaning our clothing?
The answer is no, but they're now what they call organic or soy-based dry cleaning that much of it's legitimate.
Deborah, do you have anything else on that one you want to say? Okay.
But it's GMO.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is genetically modified. They don't use organic. Although they call it organic, they don't use organic soy in the process. Now, there may be somebody in California that does, I don't know.
Okay, next one. Should we be drying our clothing on outside clothing lines?
Yes.
And I guess also, yes, with the quick answer, and then you could say, this is not a major point, or this is a major point, if I'm saying something that doesn't really move the needle much.
I think it's absolutely fine. I mean, it's unless I live right by a nuclear station, I think maybe I don't. But
Well,
I think
I'm assuming people would rather not. The question is it necessary? Is there some benefit? If it's not that big a benefit, I assume most people would rather avoid it.
no, of course, it's not necessary.
Okay.
But it would be beneficial, and I think your laundry smells much better.
Okay. How about the tight spandex type workout clothing that a lot of people wear as shorts and a lot of young boys have as underwear? How big a deal is this?
For the boys, it creates testicle cancer. For the women, as Anna already articulated, breast cancer, higher rates of ovarian cancer, perpetuation of vaginal infections. We, thank goodness, spoke to the gentleman who's the psychologist for all the Olympiads in Sweden, and his wife reversed cancer using the Hippocrates program, and so they're big advocates, and they convinced two of the teams that were obviously not doing well to get rid of all the spandex and the so-called sports clothes. I mean, the two oxymorons are sports clothes and sports bars. What's sporty about a bar, and what's sporty about polyester clothes? They may be sexy, but they're not sporty. And so when they switched, in both teams, the time went up, the endurance went stronger, the pain and injuries reduced just by the fact that they took rubber shoes off their soles, synthetic rubber shoes, started not to use it, and put organic clothing on.
Is that as strong a point as not smoking cigarettes? Like, how strong is this point?
If you don't want to get cancer or disease of any type or be fumed, and God knows what this does to the brain, neurons, or nervous systems, the answer is yes, it's pretty important. What's the most important environment that you have? The one that adorns your body. your house is toxic, can you imagine how toxic clothes affect you?
And the skin is the largest elimination organ in your body, so just imagine how we have to perspire. We get rid of it like 1.5 pounds of toxic waste every day, and I wear clothes like that, I'm not going to be able to eliminate it.
Should we each have 50 house plants in our house to absorb the chemicals? Is that an important thing?
Yes.
It's important because of aesthetics, and if you have the right soil and the right plants, it'll clean the air. But if you don't have the right soil and the right plants, it won't clean the air, and probably you need a fan system along with it. So I think a little bit more research has to be done. Most of what people are looking at is an old NASA study that was done about 25 or 30 years ago. It used fans. If you don't use the fans, there's no science yet.
Give the top 5 plants.
You'd have to look them up on Google, because I don't remember what they might be.
Some women get their hair straightened. I think it's called a Brazilian hair straightening or something similar. What's it called? Brazilian hair straightening. Is this an issue? Is this a problem? Is this okay?
I don't know.
I don't know, but I think that I don't know about that because I already have straight hair. But I think that I think it's very important that people look at the chemicals that are in the things they put on their body. And it's I don't know. I think that if people are going to dye their hair or bleach their hair, they need to try to use something more natural like henna. And not use these chemicals because, you know, beauty's important, but then of course you want to be around to be able to show off your beauty. And I think they use formaldehyde, and it's just it's really toxic. I mean, it's very. Even I know you go into a hairdressing place. The place I go is, you know, they don't use a lot of these really strong chemicals. But you can go in there and it's like a toxic waste dump.
No, yeah.
That and manicure salons, you know, really it's just terrible. It's horrible. So I would say be careful. See how important how you look is, because probably you'll look better if you're actually healthier than if your hair looks great and everything else it's gone to hell.
If your hair's curly, it's supposed to be curly.
Yeah.
Leave it that way, for God's sake.
We have an organic salon at Hippocrates, and it's funny you asked this question. 2 weeks ago, one of our guests wanted to have her hair straightened. And so the woman who directs, very, very strict about this, you could eat what we put on the body, said, if you want it straightened, you're in the wrong place. Go get an iron and iron your hair. I guess that kills it too, by the way.
Well, and you know, we have to realize the long effect of hair dyes that are chemical, because there are alternatives. You can go to most health stores and find much better alternatives. And what studies have shown for children, especially if a woman is pregnant and she's doing normal hair dye with all the chemicals, it increases the brain cancer, and you're talking gliomas, 11 times for that newborn.
Say that again.
So the brain cancer called glioma, it actually could increase 11 times, studies have shown. And that's just hair dyes.
Should women go to nail salons once a week and get their nails done?
And there is nothing super healthy. You can't eat the nail polish. So if you don't want something that has a little bit of chemicals, don't do your nails.
Eat healthy, you'll have shiny nails.
Yeah,
Okay.
You can shine them.
Take silica.
Is it a big deal if you're drinking fluoridated water?
Yes,
Yeah.
big deal. There are now over 300 animal and human studies which shows that fluoride is neurotoxic. And the second part of that is, even though we've been trying for many years to get this information and get the EPA Water Division to take this into account, they're supposed to be right now reassessing, doing a risk assessment to determine a new safe drinking water standard for fluoride. The one we are under right now is completely archaic. It's 4 parts per million. It's based upon crippling skeletal fluorosis, not even the first symptoms of skeletal fluorosis. Mexico is 1.5, Canada is 1.5, the World Health Organization is 1.5, but we are 4 parts per million. When the National Research Council reviewed fluoride's toxicity in 2006, they concluded that the current safe standard is not safe, it's not protective of health, and they asked the EPA to do a new risk assessment. That's 2006. And they still have not done it 10 years later. For 10 years we've been using unsafe standard, and what they're saying now, which is pathetically unscientific, they're saying if we control for severe dental fluorosis, which is a mottling of the teeth, we will control for every other body tissue if we protect for severe dental fluorosis. Even though we have presented them data from China which shows that children with very mild, and moderate dental fluorosis have lowered IQ. So you can't say that severe dental fluorosis is the most important endpoint. Obviously, lowering of IQ is not only more important, but it's more sensitive to fluoride's toxicity.
Should we, before we drink water, should we put a glass in the sun and let it sit there 15 minutes every time before we drink?
Possibly.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Possibly. I haven't seen studies that demonstrate it, but according to theory, this light should build fourth phase water, which is good for your health.
Just a follow-up to the fluoride, should we be using fluoride-free toothpaste?
I haven't used fluoridated toothpaste ever since I got into this issue 21 years ago. My wife twisted my arm. I didn't want it, but yes, we should not be using fluoridated toothpaste. Or rather, I think fluoridated toothpaste should be under prescription, especially for children. Obviously, fluoridated toothpaste makes much more sense than drinking fluoridated water. When you drink fluoridated water, you're exposing every tissue in the body. When you use fluoridated toothpaste, you are exposing the organ that you're trying to help. And even the proponents, the CDC, says that the predominant benefit of fluoride is topical, not systemic. So it's logical. If you want fluoride, brush it on your teeth. But unfortunately, as I think many of you know, the gums are particularly good at absorbing things. That's why you have sublingual, for heart medicine and stuff like that. It's a good place to absorb things. So you're going to get a peak. A child using fluoridated toothpaste at 1,000 parts per million is going to get a little spike. And whether or not that little spike is the same as being swallowing fluoridated water all day long, we don't know at this point. But I think the safest thing, in fact, one of the things that we should be doing is to look at what Europe is doing. 97% of European countries do not fluoridate their water.
Right.
And yet their teeth, according to World Health Organization data, is just as good, if not better, than ours. So we should be looking at the programs in Scotland, Child Smile program, and the program in Denmark, Nexo. These programs are cost effective. They go to the target, they go to the infant, they go to the parent. They educate them about better diet, less sugar, more fruit and vegetables, and teach the kids in their first lesson at primary school how to brush your teeth properly. And that's the real solution. Tooth decay is not caused by a lack of fluoride. Fluoride is not a nutrient. It's caused by too much sugar. And talking about toxics, that's probably the number one toxic in the world. It's probably done more damage to more people. And I should, this quick answer, right? Once you get me on this, you can't stop me. In United States Public Health Service endorsed fluoridation in 1950. In 1949, the Sugar Research Foundation, which is the lobby for 130 sugar interests, said, we need to find a way to reduce tooth decay without reducing sugar consumption. Then they poured money into nutrition departments, even created nutrition departments at places like Harvard, and gave a lot of money to people like Fred Stair at Harvard, to promote sugar as a nutrient. He argued in Congress that Coca-Cola was a nutritious drink, and he also promoted fluoridation. And in the Boston Globe today, there was an expose that both Fred Stair and a colleague, both of whom are dead now, had, at the behest of the sugar lobby, argued and showed papers that sugar did not cause heart disease. So these guys were so much in bed with the sugar lobby, and the sugar lobby has never, ever stopped promoting fluoridation. They are the number one beneficiary of fluoridation, to distract parents from what the parents should be doing is to make sure their kids are not guzzling gallons of sugared drinks and cookies and candy and everything else. They've taken the eye off the prize, and one of the results is this massive increase in obesity.
Wow. Can I just add to that? And because fluoride is deterrent for iodine, and iodine is so important for our thyroid. So many kids are lacking iodine now, leading to thyroid problem and thyroid cancer. We're seeing that enormous risk for that now. And fluoride is big time that we've got in our water every day.
In fact, doctors in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s in Argentina, France, and Germany gave fluoride to patients with hyperthyroidism, overactive thyroid, to lower the activity of the thyroid. Now we have almost an epidemic of hypothyroidism in this country, and no health agency in this country has looked at the possibility that this epidemic of hypothyroidism is either caused by excess fluoride exposure or exacerbated by fluoride exposure. Nothing. The whole principle, once the US government endorsed fluoridation, they showed no interest in honest research on the toxicity of fluoride. Their approach has been, if you don't look, you don't find, and have concluded that the absence of study is the same as absence of harm. Fortunately for us, China and India, which have high natural levels of fluoride, they are doing the research because they don't have a fluoridation program to protect.
But you can fight this on a local level. You can fight it, and so, for example, in our town, we don't have fluoride, and it came up that it was going to happen, and the whole village got together and said, we got to go up there. We got to go in the city hall, and we got to, demonstrate and say, we don't want this. Yeah. So it didn't happen.
Over 200 communities worldwide have stopped fluoridation since 2010. Some big, some small. But you're right. Yeah. We can fight it. We can certainly stop it coming in if you're not fluoridated, and you actually can get it out even if you are fluoridated.
Okay.
Orlando has.
Let's go back to the short answer so I can move through a lot of these. That was great. Thank you. Okay. So, do we need to put anything on our front lawn? Do we need to put some chemicals on it in order for it to grow and to stay green?
No. Period. No.
Not even organic stuff?
Not even organic. Just leave the clippings, just leave it alone.
And it'll stay green?
It'll stay greener.
With weeds.
Greener, and a real green, not that artificial, pukey kind of pool table shit green that comes from using, chemical fertilizer.
Nitrogen comes from decomposing green. So what he said is correct. When I was a kid, when you cut a lawn, nobody had chemical companies coming to you. You just left that there, and it would actually compost, and it would get stronger.
Should we put aluminum foil or plastic wrap on our food when we put it in the refrigerator when we have leftovers? And if it doesn't matter, if this is a that point, then
it does matter. Aluminium, again, is absolutely directly linked to Alzheimer's disease, autism, neurological difficulties, and so don't do that. Worse than that, take food that you're heating up again and putting it in aluminium. I mean, I'm surprised that I didn't have Alzheimer's disease. My family constantly did that. How about you? And then as far as the plastic, there are some plastic wraps, if you look long and clear on the internet, that are made out of corn, probably genetically modified corn, but corn that you can use rather than, just like we have glasses, cups at Hippocrates that are not plastic. They look like plastic cups, but they're corn created.
What about the plastic water bottles that bikers and everyone has? What should you use if you leave your house and you want to drink water all day? What type of container should you use?
Stainless steel.
What kind?
Stainless
Glass.
steel, I would say.
Glass.
Or glass.
Oh, glass.
Don't drink out of your garden hose either.
That's because of BPA, that's the chemical in there. Read on the internet, Sheryl Crow, the singer's, she was intelligent enough to wonder why she got breast cancer, and they did genetic testing. It was the bottles she was drinking out of constantly on her rock star tours.
And if you drink out of plastic water bottles, for goodness sake, don't leave them in the sun. If you're drinking in the car and you don't finish the bottle, don't leave it in the car. It's the heat which will increase the dissolution of the additives to plastic. Yeah.
I'm asking all these different things about chemicals, but when you eat processed food, donuts, French fries, processed high sugar, candies, ice creams, donuts, are there chemicals in these that we should be concerned about, or is it just white flour and sugar?
It depends. I mean, they do sell organic junk food now. But I think it's important for people to reevaluate whether we need so much grain and sugar and carbohydrates. Because I think we're overwhelmed. It overwhelms our bodies and it becomes toxic, even if it seems like it's good, like it's organic cane sugar. But I think Americans eat way too many carbohydrates, and we need to go back to more vegetables and fruits and whole foods.
Yeah.
And I think if it's nice to have a treat every once in a while, but those things are terribly addictive. I know myself, if I get into a carb thing, if I eating something, like a birthday cake or some cookies, you just don't want to stop eating them. It's addictive. Sugar is addictive, and I think that we need to move away from that as being our sort of reward is these kind of sweets and things like that, because I think they can take over people's diets, and the more people eat whole foods and healthy foods and real fruits and vegetables, I think they actually feel stronger. They feel less dependent and less sort of addicted to, this sort of input stuff.
One of the things that sugar does, having studied water, if you mix sugar with water, you get a kind of paste. And those diabetics with high blood sugar, the physicians who examine them say that their blood is like ketchup. It's so thick. So you can imagine the difficulty of having that blood flow through the small capillaries is really difficult. So the tissues get starved of oxygen, and the tissues then die as a result. It's sad.
This is called, what Dr. Pollack is talking about is something that Maillard, back in 1930, spoke about from France, and it's called glycation. This is a very, very well-known disease-causing problem that was further documented and confirmed by Dr. Harman in 1954 when he told us that most of that glycation caused free radical damage. And free radical damage is really ultimately the chemical process that creates all premature aging and disease. The spots you have called age spots are free radical damage. Sunspots, free radical damage.
What about sunblock?
They have healthier sunblock now. They use zinc.
Yeah.
They're going back to zinc instead of these chemicals.
You may want to look on Hippocrates' website, Healing Our World magazine. We interviewed a husband and wife, Ph.Ds. They're the world's leading authority on sunblocks, and show that about 90% of the market, including the ones you buy at health stores, cause cancer. And so be very, very cautious with this. There are some, as you've articulated, that are much better that you can eat. Obviously, what I would suggest for people would be that, but they're rare. You don't find these even at a health store. The other thing is, don't go in the sun in the middle of the day. Go at 9 in the morning and before, and 2 hours before sunset every night, and you really shouldn't need sunblock unless you had some major thin skin problem.
Another downside of sunblock is that you're not producing the vitamin D. With sunblocks, you're not producing the vitamin D that you need in the skin.
Is this whole conversation really necessary? Are there really specific health risks from this, or is this just like a 1 in 100 chance? I mean, are we making a big deal of something that really isn't that big a deal, or is this like smoking cigarettes where really there is proof that your health is significantly affected by all these chemical exposures?
You mean generally all the chemicals we've been talking about for the last hour and a half?
Yes.
Clearly, they're horrible. We need to eliminate them from our world. Yes.
We have an assault on the brain. We have an assault on the young brain. The number of weird neurological diseases, ADHD, which are going like this, autism going like this. What is causing all these neurological problems in young children? And we're talking about neurotoxins. Aluminium, neurotoxin. Mercury, neurotoxin. Lead, neurotoxin. Now fluoride, neurotoxin. What we have to do is to grapple with each one of those and minimize for our young children their exposure to neurotoxins. Vaccines have aluminium and mercury. Some vaccines have that mercury. You know, it's extraordinary. You probably all know this. When somebody at the CDC computed how much mercury kids were actually getting from all the 48, whatever it is, vaccines, the level that these babies were ingesting was 100 times the safe level for ingesting. So, but this neurotoxin, organic mercury, was being injected directly into the baby's bloodstream. So
2,000 times more.
Yeah, 2,000. I mean, think of the disconnect here. Now, take my world, environmental chemistry, and the agency that regulates environmental issues like EPA. EPA was very concerned about mercury coming out of power stations, mercury coming out of incinerators, because they were worried that the mercury would come out of the stack and get into the sediments of the Great Lakes and other places, and in the sediments it will be converted to organic mercury, and then it would go up the aquatic food chain, and by the time you got to the big fish, it wouldn't be safe for a pregnant woman to eat. That was their concern. Then meanwhile, over here, the CDC said, go ahead and inject newborn babies organic mercury right into their bloodstream. These people should be in prison.
Just to follow up on that, this is an audience listening who is like-minded and kind of thinks that, generally agrees with you. But for a lot of people who are at home and reading mainstream newspapers, a lot of them believe that, that the CDC, the FDA, the Environmental Protection Agency are good, hardworking, honest people that are protecting us. And so the question is it really necessary for us to put this much time and effort looking at every product and noticing everything, or can we assume that they're doing a pretty good job of making sure that these things are safe for us?
No, you can't be assured of that. You can be assured that in all these agencies, there are honest people who are determined to do a good job. They are usually the ones who get fired. They're the ones who don't make it up the bureaucratic chain. They realize you make waves, you don't advance. And this is the sad thing. And the reason is that inside all these agencies, there are people that are doing the behest in the EPA. Pesticide. The pesticide lobby is running the EPA pesticide division. In the water division, it's the dental lobby. And I'm sure other people can add. In the FDA, again, the ADA. The ADA, the American Dental Association, and the FDA are like this on mercury amalgams. Like this. The CDC is an adjunct of the ADA on mercury amalgams. The FDA is an adjunct of the ADA, American Dental Association. American Dental Association, I think, last year spent $10 million on lobbying. And on fluoride, the ADA is an adjunct of the CDC. The Oral Health Division and the American Dental Association are like Tweedledum and Tweedledee. Whatever the ADA says today, the CDC will say a few days later.
See, but with all of these things, maybe I'm changing this a little bit too much from your quick questions, FDA, ADA, whatever it is, they use 6th grade science, which is okay. For most people, they're 6th graders. They never got beyond 6th grade. The science makes sense. Study something for 90 days and take a look at the external factors and cut something open, see if things are swollen. That's 6th grade science, and that's what they all use. Instead of using, let's say, 12th grade science, or college science, or graduate school science, where you take a look at the cellular biology, where you take a look at the subcellular biology, which we can now do in a nanosecond with electron microscopes. We can take a look at a cell and tell you instantly whether there's something wrong with a chromosome caused by something that was put into the environment. And these people are all in charge, and they're all supposed to be using that kind of science, we think, but they're not. They're using 6th grade science. They're waiting for the pig to get 90 days old. They're cutting it open and seeing if the liver is swollen. But they never cut the liver open to take a look at the cell to see whether the DNA in that cell has been impacted. And we let them do it because we're stupid. We're not scientists. We go on Facebook and but we don't study science. And so from my perspective, the answer to a lot of this stuff is we got to push the science a lot harder. We got to let the scientists be scientists and not be, the minions of government, which is what they are.
But I think that it's true that there are scientists in the government who are trying to do a good job, but there are political appointees above them who decide what studies are done, what studies are silenced. There's even been lawsuits where, just a recent lawsuit where the government scientists said they were afraid to speak out, and it was thrown out. It was thrown out because, you got the job, and they have power over you, so you can't complain. So the scientists, I know scientists that have left that kind of work because they felt like they weren't being listened to, and then they were part of some kind of fraud, saying something's fine when it isn't. It's totally run by corporations, every aspect of our government. They've taken it over because for years they cared more than we cared. But now we have to care more than they care and take that back because it's our government. It's not their government.
I think there's a common sentiment about these regulatory agencies, and one way is to fight them, and another way is to go around. And I wonder if my colleagues here are knowledgeable in this area. Has anybody tried to set up a parallel organization that's something like the FDA, but an organization of the people?
Well, there is actually some very interesting information today, which I think is what you're saying. I think it is. I got an email from Ronnie Cummins. He's the head of Organic Consumers Association. And apparently there's an effort, I'm sure you know more about this than I do, there is an effort to bring Monsanto to court in The Hague. It's being organized by citizens groups to bring, if you go to the internet, you'll find it, Organic Consumers Association. There's a whole list of charges, like 300,000 farmers in India have committed suicide. There's a whole litany of horrible. I think Monsanto is the most evil corporation on this planet. And I think this might be a way to do it. The government's not doing its job, citizens have to organize and do it for them.
We need at this point a revolution of the soul, a revolution of consciousness at this point. Unlike in the past where it took blood to make changes, now it's going to take love to make changes.
Yes, that's a good way. I like it.
For a young woman who lives in an area where her friends are concerned about their appearance, and she says to her mom, which let's assume whatever, she's 20 years old, and she says, I'm going to go to the store, to the sun tanning booth to get sun tanned. Then I'm going to the laser hair removal place. And then I'm getting breast surgery to get implants, and I'm going to get some Botox. Which are all normal things in many areas. So again, sun tanning, indoor sun tanning, laser hair removal, Botox, and breast implants. Those 4. What are your thoughts?
Okay.
She needs a brain.
Yes.
But and not from a self-esteem point. That's obvious that
Yes.
that's the number one thing. But in terms of the effect on their health, how would this?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, those breast implants, that's highway to hell. So they will eventually start, first they will get all black by bacteria and mold. Everything grows on it because, anything foreign in your body will be attacked. And then they will start to erupt. So that the whatever silicone or sealant that's inside will eventually go into your system and your lymph and be traveling through your body over and over. That's hell. And we've seen so many people that have been through it, and why? And why do it when you have mastectomy? Because mastectomy, you railroad, they put the enlarger into you, and then a few weeks later, you're supposed to come in and get your implants, and you're hunky-doodle, like you never had cancer and you look the same. No, you're not. You're not the same. And there are other methods that can be done after mastectomy that is so much better. Some women decide not to do anything. And I have a bra that, for mastectomy, for example, that we put woolen implants in instead of anything with plastic, and woolen fill. And so some of our guests that decided not to do that, they will tell you, I have boobs today. And, so that's, you can decide. Or others actually now, FDA hasn't approved it yet, that you can take your own fat and you can spin and separate fat and stem cells and then put it back in. There already is where you can take fat and muscles and put it in. It's a big deal. So there's much easier things coming in future, we hope. So those, that's, and of course Botox is carnivore. It's carnivore that you put into your body. It's,
Somebody's body.
Somebody's body, really. And so that should stop you. And there are other methods. Cadaver? Yeah, it's my Swedish.
That makes a difference.
Yeah, that makes a difference. Yeah.
Comes from all cadaver.
I think the larger issue here is what it's doing to the mental health of these young girls.
Yes.
It's a reflection of the fact that our philosophy, our modern philosophy, which is being distributed around the planet, is the more you consume, the happier you become. Mm-hmm. The more you consume, the fatter you become, and the more waste you produce. To support that philosophy, this overconsumptive society of ours, we have television. Every 7 minutes on American television, we're told that we're hungry, we're thirsty, we're too fat, we're sexually frustrated, and we need a new car. So what this is doing to our kids, they're just a bundle of wants instead of what we need. And it's going to take a lot of education to get to grips with this. Huge.
Pharmaceutical drugs.
What else was it?
If we don't get all that.
Yeah. We're all persuaded we're ordinary, whereas the people on the other side of the screen are super. And to become super like them, we've got to use an underarm deodorant or a shaver or something to get like these famous people over there who are super beautiful, super handsome, super basketball players, super this, super that, and we're ordinary, we're only fit to go out and buy their crap.
That's okay.
If we could get more of our young people to conferences like this and get them involved in saving the planet and protecting our health, they would have meaning. And when you have meaning, you don't have to concentrate on the surface all the time.
Maybe we got to get more famous people to conferences like this as well, so that when they get approached, they say, no, I'm not going to do that,
Mm-hmm.
or they say, I'm going to be a role model. I can't think of, all of this stuff that's Monsanto, Dow Chemical, all the PR stuff we started to talk about at the beginning started with Hollywood. Life magazine used to be a humor magazine. Hollywood got its hands on it somehow, and it became a PR magazine, you know, with these the young stars going out with each other in the 30s when they weren't dating at all, of course. It was all make-believe junk, and all the magazines became, and all of a sudden somebody figured out if we do this with our food, our pharmaceuticals, all of this stuff, we make this make-believe PR world out there that everybody else thinks is real. And we don't sit here and say, as I like to say, holy shit, it's not real. You know,
Yeah.
we're real, they're not real. And so when it starts to happen in our politics, you know, we go, wow, this is refreshing. You know, and hopefully it will continue to happen. And I think it starts, you know, with the role models that we have. We can get anybody we want at the conferences, but before that, they're watching television. We got to get our role models to be top-notch, not to be fat cats, if you know what I mean.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I think the whole idea of having celebrities that people worship and emulate and try to become like them, I agree. I think that whole philosophy is toxic because the celebrities are manufactured. It's a PR exercise. You know, their pictures are all Photoshopped so they look perfect. It's a fiction that it's creating to sell magazines and sell products. It's not real. I think this celebrity culture and having kids, you know, want to be like this celebrity and following this celebrity and following the tweets of this celebrity, I think it's just all complete bullshit. It's just a distraction. It's a distraction so they won't actually start changing the world that they live in and making it a better place. So I think I think people should celebrate their individuality and that their lives, their own lives with their friends and their family and their work, their schoolwork, that's what's important.
Yes.
Celebrities are totally unimportant. Celebrity is bullshit culture. So I think that, you know, I'm for people becoming the heroes of their own lives and not having it be off there that they're aspiring to, which is a very...
Maybe I should have said leaders.
Leaders. Well, leaders is good, and there are some young people that are leading, and I think there's lots of... I agree with you on leaders. I think leading is... Yeah, okay, hooray, we all agree about that one.
Regarding chemicals and their exposure to people, for women who use douches and other feminine products, is this safe?
Oh God, it's so simple. At the Institute, we use wheatgrass juice. We mix wheatgrass juice and water, and we do douches with that. It's the best thing. Or you could just do an aloe vera juice in douche with that. No, the rest is chemicals. You know, anything can sit on the shelf for months and months. You know there's preservatives, there's coloring, there is whatever, everything.
Yeah, when you look at the amount of deadly carcinogenic chemicals that are in tampons and all of these products, it's almost as if it's intentionally placed in there. And so there are organic, you know, if women don't want to transition immediately to really getting clean and putting healthy types of items inside of yourself, then what you do is they have organic varieties of these. Now, obviously, that's what most of you will take that step first.
What about shampoos?
Go ahead, answer that one.
Well, you know, I get in the shower and I look at my wife's shampoos, and of course there's a different one. I never buy a shampoo, I use hers. But there's always a different one in the shower. There's 50,000 different kinds of shampoos. They can't be safe for you. When you read them, you can't pronounce the word. So is there a study on shampoo? I don't know.
Yes.
One of the most important books on the subject we're addressing tonight was written by probably the most renowned toxicologist in the world, Dr. Epstein, called Toxic Beauty, and it's about the cosmetic industry. And a colleague of mine helped him edit that book, and he shared it with me before it even came out. As much as I thought I knew, I was stunned. I knew very little. It's bizarrely bad, let's put it that way.
So the one simple question that everyone will remember and probably wants to know more than anything is just exactly what should they do about their water? What should they be drinking?
Well, again, I would certainly not fluoride. Make sure you don't drink fluoridated water. Spring water has been talked about by several people, including our friend here, with the minerals that you need and with whatever it does to the water.
I think that it's obligatory for the government to sponsor a study in which a laboratory looks at the effects of the various waters on health. I'm asked practically on a daily basis, what kind of water should I drink? And the answer is really not clear because nobody has done objectively the right study to determine which ones have the best impact on health. I know of some waters that, or I've seen the evidence that some particular waters that are created from ordinary water subjected to some microwave treatment that actually can reverse certain pathologies. I've seen the hospital records, for example, of patients who had irreversible kidney pathology reversed by drinking the water for a month. And it's not just one person, but multiple people. And this water is being made today. You can actually get it. There are other waters that claim similar health benefits and even pathology reversals. But it's necessary to have one or several independent laboratories test them objectively, because if there's anything we really need to know, it's like, what kind of water can we drink?
Talking about need to know, if you go to Europe, if you go to Canada and you get bottled water in a restaurant or anywhere else, on it will tell you what ions are present at what concentrations. There is no requirement in the United States to inform the public on the label what is in the water that you're drinking. So before we had the kerfuffle with Monsanto not labeling GMOs, we had this even more basic thing. We don't know what's in the water we're drinking. It's crazy. Land of the free?
Corporate freedom.
Yeah, corporate freedom. There we go.
I have a totally different take on this because we deal with humans every day, people in the conquest of saving their lives. And so it is clear to me, because of the pollutants that are in water, it's not good enough to go and take mineral water. There's been case study after case study and case study that the aquifers, for instance, we're in the state of Florida, as you're looking at us worldwide, and you know in the room where we are. Let's hope so, you know where we are. And the water here originated in Canada, and it goes under cities like Detroit and rivers and keeps flowing down. And you know, this part of Florida has a little bit of rock sediment in it, but we go a little further south by 30, 40 miles, and it starts to become sand and grasses. And so the water is actually going through all of these metropolitan areas, factory areas, polluted areas, farming areas. And so it is riddled, the only word I can think of that would be appropriate, riddled, overwhelming amounts of deadly chemicals and mixtures of chemicals, and chemicals we can't identify. Because when two chemicals marry one another, they become more chemicals, and 10 and 20 and 30 and 40. So this is why, after I went through decades of debating this, it is clear to us at Hippocrates for the last several years, you must get water to be at a distilled level. And minerals can be had from what you're drinking in juices, fresh green juices, organic juices. You're getting the minerals you need there. If you require more, don't just go to the health shop and buy minerals. Most of them are dead as a doorknob. They have no place in the body, and they coagulate and create hardening of the arteries and other problems. So you get ionic minerals, electrically charged minerals. So what Dr. Pollack just said, I agree with. And we don't know what we're doing yet. And he's the world's leading authority now, and he's candid and honest, and I love that. But we do know that if you manipulate water with electromagnetic frequencies, that it changes it, that there's some benefit to it. Now, maybe in the next 5 to 10 years, we'll liberate ourselves and understand how to do that and what frequency would work best for what disorder. But the truth of the matter is, you've got to start with pure water. If you don't, you'll end up sick. You could eat right, you could have a great attitude, you could exercise and drink the wrong water and end up sick and die.
The ideal is that water is purified underground. There are veins underground where water is aged and filtered. And nature has done that for thousands and thousands of years, and that eventually goes into a well. it should be absolutely pure. Then now, of course, if we test that water just that was in your well, it's not going to be what you thought. I mean, you can go maybe a third of a mile down, and you would think you will get absolutely the purest water. It isn't like that anymore. And we've used so much of pesticides and fertilizer. In Sweden, even like 30 years ago, we put a person in charge in the government of organic farming because we realized that our groundwater was destroyed by pesticides and fertilizers. And it became a big thing. So it actually became a part of it was a woman that led that, and she did a lot of research about the wildlife. And I mean, she could definitely see what organic farming was doing, and the opposite of the farms that used pesticides and fertilizers. Then we have fracking, and talking about Canada, of course, we send a lot of fracking over there, but we also have fracking all over in the United States. And that goes into our groundwater, and you've seen it on TV, how you can light a match. And so this is what we're doing to get natural gas. When we have, especially here in Florida, we have solar. We shouldn't even need to do fracking in Florida. So hopefully we'll change things, okay? Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, back to 1 minute answers so that I can get through the,
I know.
okay.
It's cool.
I have a Gabby group here.
One thing that my wife and I really sometimes have a disagreement on, have to really work out, is I really want to be hardcore and say, in the house, we never use cleaning products other than lemon, vinegar, baking soda, and I feel like I just don't want the chemicals in the house. And she says, listen, the toilet sometimes smells, there's mold in the shower, and I don't want to live in a gross house. And we go back and forth, and I say, this is serious business, and she says, I don't want it to be disgusting. So what should my wife and I do about our household cleaning product situation?
Loosen up a little bit on the vinegar that smells like hell, although it works, and it kills more microbes than the deadly chemicals she's using. But there's an in-between. Mm-hmm. There are Shackley products and other companies that really led the way 70, 80 years ago in organic products and environmental products. But there's many of these, what is it, 7th generation now, which is why biodegradable. And so there are in-between. So what is user-friendly for a modern woman like your wife, you now can find in organic or user-friendly and green-friendly products. So don't be hardcore to the point where you say, if you want to clean, you can only do it with vinegar and God knows what else.
I see a wonderful Christmas presents under the tree for your wife.
Exactly. That would be the end of the marriage.
Should we burn candles in our house?
Well, I love candles, but I don't use any toxic candles. Usually they're made of soy, yeah.
When we go through to the airport and they have the full body scanner where you hold your hands up and you turn around, one, should we use this? And two, did I see a new one that was magnetic instead of radiation? Does that make a difference?
I have never gone through one of those scanners, even after 9/11, and I think anyone listening that has any real concern for your health and longevity should follow suit with that. And there's an international law, if you opt out, the word is opt out, you don't have to go through these scanners. And now before 9/11, we actually wouldn't even have them put through the conveyor belt, the bags. Now understandably after 9/11 there's a purpose for that. There was a law before 9/11 that literally said you had to visually look at what was in those bags. So you could carry food and other things along. Now we teach at Hippocrates ways to protect what you have in there by having little cards, electromagnetic interrupters, etc. But please don't put your body through that. And there are different variations on this, but they have brainwashed the poor minimum wage employees that work with TSA and other organizations globally and told them that it's unhealthy. I found out through a document a year ago, the average length of stay at these jobs is 2.5 months. And I suspect, because I've heard it around the world when I opt out every time, some of the people come over, usually the younger ones, and say to me, why don't you do that? I say it's very harmful. This is separating your cells, changing the biofrequency fields of your body. You know, you have 100 trillion cells. Each one is supposed to be operating at 75 hertz, and we don't know what it does, but it alters, it reduces the 75 hertz. So, and one guy said to me in Canada one time, I'm going to quit this job, and I said, you should. He said, I'm anxious. He said, I'm a very calm guy. I come to work every day, and I'm anxious. By the time I get out, I'm wired. I can't even sleep at night.
Did you just say that you don't want to?
It's called opt-out. There's nowhere on the planet Earth, I travel the Earth constantly, that you ever have to go through one of these units.
It's
But
called.
then they manually, they
They
frisk
pat
you.
you down.
They pat you down.
You get a massage.
You,
Just pat you.
Is there any concern about every day blow drying your hair?
well,
Blow drying your hair every
when
day?
you're holding a blow dryer, you know that you get more EMF than if you're standing under the high volt. You could actually get much more. So you're electrifying yourself. You're electrocuting yourself. You really are. You know, this is not electricity that your body has. You're working on a totally different level. So you're just a frequency. You're disturbing your whole system actually, and your hair is not doing good with it.
If you go, all of the hairdressers we know that use it are hair barber shops. They get ionic ones. They're not perfect, but ionic is supposedly much, much, much better. They're grounded in some way.
The electromagnetic radiation brings up the issue of cell phones. There are lots of studies on cell phones, and of course the cell phone companies would like you to think that they're harmless. The fellow in the laboratory next to mine, just retired, said that he's looked at many studies and he studies this, and when the studies are sponsored by the cell phone company, 95% of them report no problem. When they're funded by other groups, 95% of them report serious problems. And he's suggesting that within a short time, cell phones will be considered the same as cigarettes are right now.
Let's take that further. What about if you're not using a cell phone, but you have in your house a wireless router?
If you think the cell phone is bad, the router is worse. So if you are going to use a router, and most of us will because you have computers in your home, shut it off at night. And it's pretty easy, if you're going to build a home, put a switch on the wall. If not, go down to the hardware store globally, and you can buy plugs that go into the wall that you plug the router into with an on and off switch. So you basically put it on, you put it off, and go to bed at night. Do not keep it on. Do not have this anywhere in close proximity to where you sleep. Remember, where you sleep, you should be there 8 hours or more a night. And so you don't want to be zapped there at all either. And so these are high concerns that we take for granted because they sort of slipped into our culture and our societies without us ever thinking it out.
I think it also people can actually go back to being getting their computer hardwired. Somehow we assume that we have to have Wi-Fi in our house, but if you have a main computer or a secondary computer, you just hardwire them into the wall. That's where you want, instead of having to always assume that we're just going to go Wi-Fi.
Just like in the last 5 days, Apple came out with new headphones that are wireless. Do you have any thought on wireless headphones? So they're connecting, I guess. I'm not sure. They're wireless.
It just seems like a bad idea.
right.
It just seems like a bad idea. I mean, these beams, I think there's too many beams going through the air. It's just too many.
University of Bologna in Italy did a study on the Bluetooths and said it created the same amount of significant brain cancer, only isolated it, made it smaller and going deeper into the brain. So seemingly this would be the same technology, Bluetooth type technology, so it would be bad. At Hippocrates, by the way, we brought scalar units in, so the entire property, as a matter of fact, 1/8 of a mile in every direction around Hippocrates now, it is somewhat protected by the scalar units. But again, this is big money and the average person doesn't have this available to them. On your phones, you need to get little devices. There are legitimate EMF interrupters. on your phone. Maybe one of you want to run this up so that the people in the world can see it. And so you bring it up and I'll show it. And then number 2, you can wear around your neck, as we do, necklaces that are EMF interrupters too. This gives you some level of protection. It's not 100%. You're not going to. 100% is you don't use a cell phone. When I use a cell phone, and my children hate me for this, it's here and on speaker. I'm at airports. I don't care. I have it on speaker. Now, Anna's going to show the audience out there in the world. On the back of that, you have an electromagnetic field interrupter. The one that we chose after looking at science and for decades is GIA, G-A-I-A. And there's good ones in Germany. It slipped my mind what the name is, but you can look this up and look at the different science behind it. Thanks for letting us see this.
And get a habit of using the speakerphone. So right like this, that's how it should be far away from you. And also when you have the cordless phone, because that's very radioactive, and the base of the cordless phone, should not be anywhere close to you where you're sleeping, because it's just radiate. And radiation stops cell division. And we're nuking our food right now. It's a lot of the food in your local supermarket that's not organic is actually nuked, from vegetables, fruits, meats, everything. It's nuked, and it stops the cell division, so things can stay on the shelves for a much longer time, but it doesn't have that life in it either. And so the less radiation we get, the better it is. So cordless phone, the base, make sure it's far away from where you're sleeping.
And also, when I travel, I use my cell phone as an alarm, and an expert in this field told me to put it on airplane mode
airplane.
if you're alone in a hotel room with it,
Yeah.
because otherwise it's searching. They're searching, sending out these really, really strong waves to pick up to whatever cell phone tower there is. So it's very, very strong, and it's looking everywhere, so it's going right through your body.
Yeah, and your thyroid is right here. So you're holding the cell phone. So tons of people now have thyroid problem. Not only is it Fukushima, Chernobyl, now we're doing it right to ourselves, right here. So I interviewed Dr. Hardell is like the authority. I mean, he's done so many studies. He's from Sweden, and because in Europe, especially Scandinavia, we started to use cell phone before everybody else. So you saw 3-year-olds running around 20 years ago that had cell phone and just being with friends, and so they could talk to mom. And so we have a history of brain cancers, and we have benign or malignant brain cancer, and he really could see how it doubled the risk, having the phone on your ear, having that close to your brain. And actually the brain cancers happen right in that site. So it was really, really clear for him. And, we're paying a big price for the modern time, and we can't live without it. I mean, Brian and I we're not really, really good at computers, but we're getting into it because, this is the time we live in. But we are careful about it too, and we protect ourselves as much as we can. So, don't wear the cell phone. You guys, don't wear that cell phone in your pants pocket, because that, where that goes. It goes straight. It lowers your sperm count within 35 seconds, and even change the form of the sperm. So a lot of infertility is happening, and actually cell phone is big time. Prostate cancer, there's a lot of things that can happen. So you gotta be careful. Don't wear it on your body. So now you need a man bag.
So what Anna just referred to was a study done at Yale University that we were all stunned with and thought maybe it was faulty, that when a man or a boy puts a cell phone in his pocket and it's near his testes, within 30 to 35 seconds, 40% of the sperm is inactive. But it was reconfirmed by Exeter University in England 2 years ago. Same exact numbers, so that's a done deal. When you have two not only reputable but world-class universities with world-class researchers saying it, that's it. Number 2, you may want to look on the archives of the Real Truth About Health conference and look up America's leading authority, Dr. Deborah Davis, and watch her at one of our conferences we held years ago in New York City. She stunned the audience. We all gasped when she showed pictures of a rare form of cancer created by cell phones that young ladies were putting in their ears. And right where the battery was right where the cancer is. So this is not a maybe, possibly, and what you're hearing today is extreme. You're extreme if you don't believe what we're saying.
Okay, so I'm going to try to move quick since there's limited time. And just going quick answers. Do we need to ever think about special toilet paper?
I guess I'm the one that knows about shit. How many of you know a lot of your toilet paper, commercial toilet paper, is made out of newspapers? So one guy in this knowledgeable audience knew it. How many of you raised your hand out of the hundreds or thousands of you out there in the world? So rubbing your private areas with dye is not a great idea. The recycle may even be that. And of course, we always go recycle because of who we are, but the reality is I question sometimes if that's good. Now, we think it's odd in the West, but in India, where they have much cleaner buttocks than we do, they still use the old method, which is called water. Water. And why you never ever shake anyone's left hand is because of that. But believe it or not, that is more sanitary than the Western approach to this. But you'd have to be very sure that you cleaned your hand after that because of the possible problems you may have.
And in Japan, it's very common for the toilets to have water that squirts up.
Yeah.
And that works just fine.
Oh boy, in South Korea, I went on one of those toilets, and everything was in Korea. I took a chance and pressed a button, and this spout of water shot up, went over my shoulder into the bedroom. And I didn't know how to switch it off. It was awful. Oh.
Do you have any thought on microwaves?
You want to nuke the food? I mean, it's like...
No, my wife and I have never used a microwave oven.
No.
Okay.
Has anyone ever considered how microwaves work? I'll tell you a true story. In 1961, I was on a double date, and the girl I was with, it wasn't her dad, but the girl we were picking up in the car, her dad was a GE engineer, and the mother had a prototype microwave. And I'll never forget, it looked like, a spacecraft. And we went inside of the kitchen, and she said, "Watch this." And she put an apple in the oven. Now, an apple normally took 30 minutes, 40 minutes to bake, and we all loved bacon. It was the autumn, and it was crisp outside, and she put it in, and it took 1 minute. And all our little heads were at that window, and I don't think I've been the same since, watching that thing. But there are some studies that show that sterility is caused by microwaves and the leaking, and as they get cheaper, they become less protected. And so there's a lot that you don't want. So you're actually scrambling the molecules. And when they hit each other, they heat up very rapidly and destroy the genetic structure of the biology that you're now cooking. And when you put that into your body, you're not going to tell me, understanding chemistry the way I do and genetics the way I do, that that's not going to alter your DNA and RNA.
What about...
You're changing all the vitamins, minerals, and proteins. And you're just changing how you alter them, actually. And cooking alters it, too. So that's why we want to eat everything raw if we can. 80-20 raw, 20% could be cooked. But especially if I'm healthy, it's okay, 80-20. But the more raw I eat, then I get the real protein. As soon as I cook it, as soon as I heat it, over 115 Fahrenheit, I alter actually the composition and the protein. But I put it into a microwave oven, now I'm making a monster. That's Frankenstein.
You also alter the water because it's the water molecules that are flipping around.
Yes.
And the ordinary food contains this fourth phase of crystalline-like water, but when you subject it to the microwave, we did some experiments, you lose all that.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Wow.
And the Russians... The Russians did some studies years ago because they were concerned about health effects, and the allowable levels of microwave radiation in the environment were much lower than in the U.S. I don't know if the U.S. has changed any, but the Russians were really concerned about that. And so, yeah, this is problematic.
What type of deodorant should we use?
Type of what?
Deodorant.
I don't know why people need deodorant.
If you eat well.
I think
right.
if you eat well,
No.
but I think if people eat well and they're healthy, unless they're sick, I think that if they shower, I don't know. I don't know. I remember my father saying when I was like 12 or something, he says, "Why do we all have to wear deodorant? I didn't wear deodorant when I was a teenager back in the 1930s, you know." But I think there are healthy. I don't know. I don't use deodorant, but I think there are healthy deodorants that just are, you know, oils and, you know, whatever that have herbal scents and things. But we're supposed to sweat. We're supposed to sweat, and if you block the parts of your body that are supposed to sweat, those toxins that are coming out actually stay in your body. So I think the whole idea that we don't ever want to sweat, that's a terrible thing to do. We don't want people to know we sweat. I think that's, I don't know. I think it's problematic.
I urge people to watch that video, The Age of Aluminium. It's made in Germany. It's 49 minutes long, and they do go into the fact that some deodorants, most deodorants in fact, the stick-type deodorants, contain an aluminium product. And being cautious, I haven't used those products for 20-odd years. You can get deodorants which use pretty benign substances, not aluminum products.
There's a scale you can get, and forgive me because I don't get on the internet often, on the internet that my daughters with their children use all the time, that show you the toxicities of different products. So it's safecosmetics.org. Safecosmetics.org. And so, you know, the good news is today, no matter where you're listening to us, if you're in Asian countries, you can hit it and get pretty good translation too. So it's not just in English, you know, readers. So I would, you know, and it's stunning because I double-checked behind the 2 or 3 things she said, and it was spot on.
So someone's listening to this whole thing, they've heard you make comments on a lot of things, and they're saying, I don't know, my mom's 83, and I had a grandmother who lived to 91, and I don't know, I think these people are overreacting. So what's different about the chemical industry today than 50 years ago that's making you say that the results that their grandmother or mother got, who's in their 80s and 90s, might not be the same thing we should expect if we're in our 20s, because it's, in other words, what's different about the world and the chemical industry that makes us feel that the same results that our grandmother got might not be in store for us?
Well, I think what's happened is, over this period of time, we've got further and further away from nature's methodology. Going back to the presentation we heard this afternoon, what an incredible thing soil is. Incredible. All the interplay, the incredible interplay between all these different, I can't even remember what they were, but the incredible interplay. And if you're a biochemist and you start looking at the metabolic pathways, it's staggering how nature controls everything, all the feedback mechanisms and so on. They're really staggering. Like there's 10,000 chemical reactions going in on our body. They are switched on and off, but it's done in such an incredibly synchronized manner that we maintain a steady temperature, even though you're getting reactions, liberating, absorbing heat. Nature is fantastic. Nature has brought us to this point after millions of years of experimentation. We, after a couple of hundred years, absolute pygmies in understanding chemistry, are changing the DNA. You've never seen a mouse make love to a strawberry, but that's what Monsanto is enabling this to happen. And changing the nucleus. I mean, we are so arrogant as a species, but it's all because people can make money out of this. And all the time we have greedy corporations. We're going to be the victims of this. But where we can simplify, trust nature, simplify. And you can start by growing your own food, composting, etc. That's the simplest place to start. In fact, I would recommend any teacher watching this, first lesson, the first time the child comes into the class after they've learned to brush their teeth properly, is give them a seed and let them plant that seed. They don't even know what it is. Let them plant that seed. Let that seed grow and nurture it. That is the best place to start education. But the respect for nature. I'll tell you a funny story. I was traveling in Pennsylvania. I went to a restaurant. On the menu, fish and chips. Grown up in England, love fish and chips. I said to the waitress, I said, "What kind of fish is it?" And she said, she looked a bit puzzled. She says, "You know, triangular." And it was. But this waitress was completely disconnected to the idea of a fish.
I think one of the problems is, obviously, compared to the grandmother situation, we have more people, we have infinitely more chemicals,
Yeah.
infinitely more uses for those chemicals as we, change from a work-style life to a leisure life, so that we've got more variety of these chemicals, and as a result, there's bound to be some problems. We already know there are problems. We know now that a lot of these chemicals cause cancer, cause Hodgkin's disease, et cetera, and then we learn that they have impacts. That there are impacts that are going on that didn't exist when your grandmother was around, like soil loss. 75,000 tons in British tons, or million tons, British tons of loss a year of soil because we're putting chemicals on them and they're losing their structure.
Yes.
So it's all of this stuff adds up and adds up. And once you start getting sick and you live sick and then you breed sick, we're killing ourselves off. And by going back to nature, I think you're right. We at least let something that has been able to sustain life for how many millions of years take over again, instead of a bunch of people who have 6th grade science education requirements imposed on them running our lives. It's that simple.
Now, assume...
Mother or, it's the bad guys.
This only started about 170 years ago in your old country,
Yeah.
when the Industrial Revolution started. And back then, they were creating approximately 10 to 15 chemicals a year. By the year 1978, we've consistently, on an average, created 2,000 brand new chemicals every year. So this year, 2,000 chemicals will be created in laboratories, mostly at universities, that literally have never existed before. Now, when they enter into the ecosystem, the environment, the water, the air, the land, the soil, your food chain, etc., they multiply those thousands and thousands of chemicals and become millions, if not tens of millions, if not billions of different chemicals. Nobody knows what they are. If you take the most brilliant chemist in the world, she or he cannot possibly, in 25 million lifetimes, figure out what we've created through the mutation of chemicalization.
Now, someone leaves this conference and they say, I don't know, chemicals don't seem so good, and they tell their friend, their spouse, their someone, and that person responds, what are you going to do? You can't feed the world without chemicals. We have to use chemicals. It's the only way to grow enough food. So what do we do?
Well, that's not true. We don't need chemicals to grow food. In fact, there have been studies by the UN, there have been a study by University of Michigan, there have been studies that show we don't need chemicals to feed the world. There's more food in the world. There's food enough in the world now to feed 14 billion people. The problem is access to food, not growing food. There's more of a problem with obesity in the world than starvation. And I think that we've proven now that people can grow even a couple thousand acres of wheat organically on one farm. We can feed the world with agroecological methods, and we've proven it. And I think we just need to insist on that and not let and most GMOs, which use, the things that, most GMOs that they're meant to be sprayed with chemicals, they don't feed people. The worst food that we use the most chemicals on don't feed people. They feed cars and cows, and they create corn syrup. So that is absolutely not true, and I think that we need to support organic and agroecological methods, and we have to stop subsidizing the chemical industry and the agricultural industry, and we have to stop destroying our soil, or we'll be out of soil within the next 20 or 30 years. And it's absolutely not true that we can't feed the world organically. They've proven it over and over and over again, and we need to just insist that people pay attention to the scientists that have done these studies and not the corporations that are trying to sell us their terrible products.
One of the loveliest experiments I've seen was they divided a large piece of land into plots, and they sort of then spread at random a whole bunch of seeds. And it turned out that the plot that was the most robust was the one that had the most variety, the most seeds there. So nature thrives on abundance and different species and so on. Maybe you know more about that.
Right, that's true. And I think we need to get back to smaller farms. What's happened there was a deliberate campaign on the part of the government. It was called Get Big or Get Out in the 70s, to get rid of small family farms and turn them into giant corporate farms that had, $2 million compounds and using lots of chemicals and lots of fertilizer. But we go back to smaller family farms, which is a huge movement in the United States and all over the world. Young people, they want to go back and have these small farms that feed the community and feed their families. People are growing gardens in cities and in their backyards. We can do it. It's the most exciting part of the food industry, the food world today, is these smaller farms where the people growing your food, and you like that food, you choose that food, it's part of your life. Kids go to these farms and get interested in farming and things growing. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing to do with your time. You get off the internet, go out there, grow something, go to a farm, support people that are growing things organically. This is what people want. It's what people want. It's a natural thing. We as humans want to get our hands in the soil. We want to walk on soil with our feet. And it's possible now to do it. And this is what our government should be supporting and subsidizing instead of fighting. And I think we just have to insist on it. And this is something that, it's very difficult to change a lot of the things that we feel are wrong in the world today, but we can choose what we eat. And we can choose where we get that food. And that's something that's happening already, and we just need to strengthen that movement so that the alternative just falls away. Monsanto just falls away because no one's supporting it. They just go bankrupt and out of business.
This is a little off subject, but it's poignant because it's timely. Just today, a report came out. In this country, by the way, we have a reported $7 trillion deficit. Just today, it was reported since the first Iraq war and terrorism, we've spent and will spend $4.8 trillion on killing and war and fighting, as you say. And if we can't take several billion dollars and start to be pro-health, pro-biology, pro-nature, pro-human, we will not survive as a species.
There we go.
So, if you would each take 60 seconds to make any closing thoughts that you'd like to make.
Start with you.
This has been a very This has been a very exciting and moving discussion. I always think that research is, being a researcher myself, that research is critically important. And one of the areas I like to reiterate is for our health, especially, is the water that we drink. And if I can make one comment on this, I would say that the people granting the money ought to be alerted to the fact that it's really important to study adequately the water, the type of water, and the effect it has on our health. And I can say that in my own experience and those of my colleagues, the people at the, for example, National Institutes of Health and elsewhere, they almost never heard of the word water. They heard of genes, they heard of DNA, they heard of proteins, but water, which makes up 2/3 of our body, is something that seems absolutely foreign to them. And 50 years ago, people knew that water was central for health. For example, the great Nobel laureate, the father of modern biochemistry, Albert St. Georgi, who won the Nobel Prize for discovering twice, did he?
Yeah.
Oh, well. Vitamin C, yeah, I didn't know he wanted, what did he win it? No. Or you're thinking of Linus Pauling?
No, I think San Giorgio did.
Did he? Okay, anyway, one of his famous quotes is, life is water dancing to the tune of solids. So he knew that water was absolutely central for everything, and it seems that as scientists have pulled apart the cell and the molecule and the parts of molecules to study them, they lost sight of the matrix that it surrounds all of these structures. And only now are people beginning to go back to understanding how critical the water is for practically every function in your body. If you count the number of molecules, if you line up all the molecules in your body and you count them one by one, 99 out of 100 are water molecules. The water molecules are so small, and to fill that 2/3 volume, there are a lot of water molecules. So how arrogant it is to think that 99% of your molecules do nothing but sit there and bathe the more important molecules of life. So we need to return to water. We need to return to studying water and understanding how important the water is for every aspect of our function.
I'm not suggesting that water fluoridation is the most important issue discussed at this conference. I think GMOs is far more important. But I would say it's the easiest problem to fix. All you need is a strong wrist to turn off a tap at the public waterworks. To get that turning of the wrist, we need more people educated. I hope you will help. The three messages I leave with in most of my talks around the world is, one, to citizens, don't let the experts take your common sense away. They will if they can. Secondly, to politicians, start putting your faith back in people. Stop running to high-paid consultants and magic machines. And thirdly, to activists, very important, very, very important, have fun. Even though these issues are grim, you've got to keep going. You can't burn out. And so you've got to enjoy what we have. What we have is a great movement, a grassroots movement. You're here not because to make money. You're not here for political power. You're here for your children, your grandchildren, your community, and possibly the planet. You're working with fabulous people in this grassroots movement. Enjoy that.
Very great. Tonight we've talked about how horrible chemicals are and what we should be against. I'd like to change that chapter, and rather than being against something, if you're really, really, truly for yourself and for others, you just won't make bad choices. So start focusing not on the negative, but more the positive. You. Love yourself, respect yourself, do the best you can all of the time, and these problems will go away.
My favorite book, Eric Fromm, The Art of Loving. Please say.
Well, I always say, and I know because for more than 40 years I worked in the field of natural health care, and our bodies are very forgiving. So it's just waiting for us to wake up and start eating well, drinking good water, taking care, start walking every day, go lift weights or lift your kids, and start using your body like the tool it was meant to be. It wants to be moved. It doesn't want to sit. We would have a totally different body if we were supposed to sit. So we have these legs and this long body and the head on the top, and we're walking on two legs, and we're supposed to walk. We have to go back to walking. We're supposed to walk long distance, miles and miles every day. That's what we were supposed to do. So, our bodies are forgiving. You start doing that for yourself, it comes back. And our environment is forgiven. And you can see, once we stop using chemicals in one area, how fast the nature comes back and how willing it is. And yes, soil will take hundreds and hundreds of years to get back, but we can nourish that soil. So now if I have compost, and I should use everything in my household to make compost, and if you live in an apartment, then save it and then go out when nobody sees you and put it around all the trees in your neighborhood. and enrich that trees and be really, really happy. And, so realize it's all about forgiving. And, when it comes to Monsanto and GMO, then now we're being brainwashed that the world is going to need it because we're going to be 9 billion people soon, and how are we going to feed ourselves? Don't go for that. And it doesn't, the crops that GMO is giving is nothing compared to what an organic farmer or biodynamic farmer can do. Plus the quality. We don't talk quantity anymore. We talk quality. So that's the deal. Thank you.
When I was halfway through making a film I made on soil that I'm going to be presenting tomorrow called Symphony of the Soil, and I was revisiting the idea of photosynthesis that I first learned about, third or fourth grade or something, and I was trying to figure out how to present this in the film, and at some point I realized that photosynthesis is a miracle. It's a miracle that you can take sunlight and a plant can turn it into carbon that we end up ultimately feeding our bodies and creating our bodies and creating our children with that. That life is a miracle. And I think we need to do what we can to remember that every day when we look out, to appreciate the beauty in the world, to appreciate our friendships, to appreciate our bodies, to appreciate skin, which is a miracle in itself, and to really realize that this is an incredible planet. And America is an incredible country. We are so blessed in this country of all our resources, and we're wasting it. And I think we don't want to, I think that, to me, that's what I've tried to do and try to help people do, is to move beyond cynicism to a place of honest action and to appreciate that the future is in our hands. Because if we don't make the changes we need to make and help those changes sustain themselves in the world beyond our lifetimes, that it won't be here. This planet, it will be a dead planet. So I think that this is a very important time, and that gatherings like this, where we can get together and meet like-minded people and feel like we're doing something important to help. You want to help. I think it's such an important thing. So I want to thank you all for being here, and especially thank you, Steve, for making it possible for us to be here too.
Well, there's not a lot to say left, I guess, because these people have all said it very eloquently. I think one of the things that all of us up here is curious. And I think that's what I want to leave everybody with. I think you got to feed your curiosity. And if you feed your curiosity, you figure things out, you change your mind, you get to the answers, and when you get to the answers, you get to the truth, and when you get to the truth, then you're where you need to be.